We are live and on YouTube. Good afternoon, everybody. This is the Vermont State Senate Committee on Institutions. Today is March 30th, 2021. I am your host, Joe Benning, the chair of Senate Institutions. We also have with us Senator Mazza from Grand Isle, Senator McCormick from Windsor, Senator Ingalls from Essex Orleans, and Senator Parent from Franklin County. Today's discussion is going to start our formal review of the Capitol bill as it has been passed by House Corrections and Institutions. Has it gotten past the House in general yet? I'm seeing Becky Wasserman say yes.
Yes, it has.
So officially, although it hasn't, has it been referred to us yet? Do we know? We were referred a bill today, but I wasn't quick enough to catch the number of the bill.
I don't
So-
see it on the bill status page, but it might not have been updated yet.
Okay.
That's often out of behind.
Yeah.
The
Well,
page is
in any
often
event,
behind.
we are going to officially walk through the language of the biggest bill that we have to deal with. And I'll just remind everybody who may be watching on YouTube, we'll endeavor to try to bring our discussion down to a grassroots level so that everybody can understand. If I catch vernacular trying to slip through that most people probably wouldn't at first glance, I'll try to pull it back and ask to have some explanation of what's going on there. For the purpose of today's discussion, we have Ledge Counsel Becky Wasserman with us to talk about the language of the bill. For the committee's edification, tomorrow we are going to have Representative Emmons joining us to give us a full walkthrough of why they did to the governor's recommend what they did to it. And then we can pick up conversation after that to decide what we're going to do to what they did to it. For now, I'm going to ask Becky to take over and walk us through from scratch. And Becky, again, just keeping in mind that there are people out there that have never been exposed to this before. We'd like to keep it at a grassroots level if at all possible. And of course, start off by identifying who you are. But Senator McCormick has a question.
Yeah, just inquiry, are we going to be working with the spreadsheet we were just mailed, or just received in the mail? Is that what we're using?
I'm
Uh,
thinking that today is about language, and we're going to pick up the spreadsheet details, I think, in a little more detail tomorrow, but we will have to walk through it
Okay.
eventually with everybody as well.
We're not using it today. We're using language today.
I'm going to let Becky answer that question.
Yeah, so Becky Wasserman, Legislative Counsel. I'm going to bring up the bill language and share the screen if that works for everyone. There was an amendment on the House floor, and it's now incorporated into the unofficial version of the bill, which is posted on the web now. I think that just happened this morning, so I can bring that up in case you all don't have that final as passed version from the House. So if that works, I can bring that up now. I also, just so you know, sent a section summary of the bill to Denise, and I don't know if that is posted or if you'd like me to just email that around to everyone, but I can do that as well.
Committee, it's very handy if you copy that out and review it so we're all on the same page.
Oh, it is posted.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. That's a document that we're going to be working off of, at least in summary form, but it may give all of you an idea if there's a particular section that you feel like you would prefer to report on the floor. We can start with that document to give you some signals on how we're moving forward. With that, Becky, it's all yours.
Okay, great. I think I don't have screen sharing ability, so I don't. Denise, would you be able to give that to me? Okay, here we go. Gonna zoom in and let me know. That would be too much here. Is that too big, or is that good for everybody?
Well, I can see it fine. There may be other people who still can't see it well enough.
Good for me.
Good for me.
Yep.
Apparently we're good.
Okay, great. So this is H 438, the capital bill as passed by the House. I understand that you've had a walkthrough of the spreadsheet with the numbers in it. So unless you'd like me to, I won't read the line by line appropriations. I'll just try to stick generally to the language of the bill, but please let me know if you'd like me a little more detail on any of the appropriations.
For now, that's fine, Beck. Let me ask a question though, with Catherine still on the line. You did send us a spreadsheet. Have any of those numbers changed since the House was still working on this?
No, Becky, the amendment on the floor was just language. Is that correct? Yeah.
That was just language, yeah.
Yeah. Yes, the numbers
Okay.
should be fine.
Thank you.
Okay, so to orient you all, since this is the first year of the biennium, there's usually a legislative intent section in the capital bill during the first year of the biennium, which is setting out that it is a 2-year capital budget process. And so in subsection A, it's saying that of the amount that you have to spend in bonded dollars, which is the total is $127,378,694. There's approximately 70 million appropriated in the first year of the biennium, and that the intent is to spend the remainder in the second year. But subsection B is also making it clear that any of the appropriations in FY23 for the second year can be amended in the capital construction and state bonding adjustment bill next year. So unless there was something that indicated that it should not be touched for next year, sort of all those FY23 appropriations are open to adjustment next year. Section 2 of the bill appropriates funds for capital construction projects, specifically for state buildings, and these appropriations go to the Department of Buildings and General Services. BGS has language that is there every year that says that the commissioner is authorized to direct funds to the projects specified in this section, but a project can be canceled if there's notification given to the chairs of your committee and the House Committee on Corrections and Institutions.
Becky, let me stop you for a moment and say to the committee, if anybody has any questions at any point, jump in and shout because I can't see everybody on the screen. Thank you.
So just generally speaking, subsection B in section 2, that state building section, so we're on page 2 now, is setting forth all of the appropriations to BGS in FY22. So I won't go through any of these specifically unless there are any questions, but that is sort of the structure here of subsection B being the FY22 appropriations.
So just to educate everybody on the committee and anybody who may be watching, the figures that you're now seeing do in fact correspond with the numbers that appear on your spreadsheet.
That's right. And there should be a column on the spreadsheet that has the, that says B1, for example, that corresponds to the major maintenance appropriation.
Just for the
in
record,
bill.
I might state that the major maintenance is 7 million and engineering and architect fees are 3.5 million. So it's half of what the maintenance budget is. So
Point well taken.
how many people could we hire for 3.6 million? Okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to point out that 3.6 million is actually salaries. So,
Wait a minute. That's outside firms though.
no, That is Joe Asia's staff. Those are the in-house architects and engineers who work on the projects.
How many you have? 50, 100?
320, no, it's more in the, I would have to get back to you with the
That's all right. You don't
number.
have to take it up today. That's all right. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll come around to it.
Okay.
So I
And-
guess that brings up another question though. Why is it that the capital bill actually contains salaries for state employees?
That's a great question. I was just going to raise that in response to what Eric said, that there is language in the policy section of the bill, and I'll get to that in a minute. A number of years ago, the institutions committees had made a decision that at some point the salaries for engineering costs would be transferred from the capital bill to the general fund as a general fund expense rather than a capital expense. For a number of years now, the date at which that switch is supposed to happen keeps getting extended. So this bill is extending that again, I believe, until 2023.
Okay. Not sure how to respond to that because for a couple of years now, we've been trying to push to keep this bill as clean as possible. And this is one of those spots that it's just not, it's not coming out smelling like roses. Let's put it that way.
Smells like pork to me. Okay.
Yeah.
It might be a good question for Chair Emmons tomorrow when she presents the bill. She has a better sense of why this is the state of affairs. Eric Filkhorn, BGS, by the way, for the record.
I completely agree with you, Eric, except when you used the word might. It will be a good question for her.
I wouldn't want to determine your line of questioning, sir.
We'll just tell her it was your idea.
Great.
Thank you.
If I might.
Sure.
Sure. I'm Catherine Benham from the Joint Fiscal Office. And this is an ongoing discussion. I actually in 2013, which is actually quite a while ago, I wrote a report about this. It's you could consider this is a gray area because it is, if you were hiring a contractor, they would be doing engineering costs and you would pay for this project cost. So it is one of those areas that's could be go either way in terms of just accounting process. You all have made the choice that you wanted to separate it. So, and you have not withstood that every time since you made that choice. But I would just let you know that if you care to go back, there's a report that's several years old on this very topic.
Yeah, I seem to recall way back in 2011 when I was first on this committee, we were having this conversation. And we settled on the idea that various projects might have to include the funds necessary to hire the engineers or the architects that are wrapped around that project. But maintaining permanent state employee positions was never the idea or understanding. And I'm struggling with this, but it's there. So I guess we flagged it and we'll continue the conversation.
Well, yes, and you did call, it was in 2012 you called for the study, which is why I did that report. So you're right, it has been an ongoing discussion for quite a while.
Thank you.
So I will move on to the bottom of page 2, subsection C. This is just repeating the appropriations to BGS, but for FY23. So this goes through to the next page, and you'll see that the way the bill is laid out, that after every money section in the first part of the bill, there's the total appropriation for FY22, the total appropriation for FY23, and then the total section 2 appropriation. And again, all those numbers should line up for what is in the spreadsheet. Moving on to section 3, these are the appropriations for human services. So subsection A has the FY22 appropriations. Just to make everyone on the committee aware. Sometimes in the money sections, there's funds appropriated to BGS for another agency, and sometimes it's appropriated directly to that other agency or department, and it depends on who is doing the work. So in this case, you'll see in subsection A that the funds are being appropriated to BGS for AHS for these projects. And I think Eric, BGS weighed in on all of these while the bill was being drafted in House institutions to make sure that it's going to the appropriate agency or department.
That's correct.
So I was not present for the conversation in this committee when the women's facility was brought up. And I'm seeing it's $500,000 that's dedicated to that discussion, which is obviously far short of any formal decisions being made. In fact, I'm suspecting that's probably just the designers, if even that. But committee, any of you able to tell me exactly what the discussion was surrounding the women's facility? Because as of right now, I haven't watched the video and I don't know where they were ending up.
I think the message was replacing it, that for sure, because I don't think it's something they can accommodate the large population. So I thought I got out of it they got to figure to replace it or build one big facility, but that's not going to happen. I think this is the one that needs replacement the worst. Maybe somebody remembers something else. I don't know.
Oh, I'd agree with that.
Okay.
So there is some language in subsection D that I can skip to that might be helpful. So there's the, sorry, I'll try not to make you dizzy. So A2 is the appropriation of 500,000 for the women's correctional facilities. And
Right.
then B1 is the FY23 appropriation.
Okay.
So, oh, and now I'm noticing this is a mistake. I think it should be A1 here in subsection D, which I will make a note of that. So this says that for the amount appropriated, oh no, A2, that's, sorry, that's correct. So the amount appropriated in A2, which is a 500,000, corrections and BGS shall determine space and programming needs for the state-owned and operated women's reentry and correctional facilities. So this is looking at both the idea of a reentry and correctional facilities. And that 500,000 is looking at specifically just space and programming needs.
So right now, having noticed that word any, right now I understand we have one women's correctional facility. Are there any other re-entry facilities that we currently have?
No, I think the idea of using any is to address that you could have one correctional facility, or you could have a reentry facility and a women's facility. And I think part of looking at what the programming needs for both of those is determining how many or what design would be needed for both of those purposes. And I'm looking at Eric to make sure I've explained that correctly.
So
I
far,
think they
so
didn't
good.
want to, yeah, I think they didn't want to name that it was going to be a correctional facility or a reentry facility until the programming needs were determined.
So all options are wide open right now.
Mr. Chairman,
That's
Yes,
my
Eric.
understanding.
I think at the moment in time that this bill passed out of their committee, this was as prescriptive as they felt comfortable being, knowing that the HOK report is going to probably spark additional discussion. And this gives us enough room to be able to respond to whatever recommendation the legislature makes by the end of the session.
And is any such language contained herein that enables the same conversation for men, or is this a general gender specific decision that we're making here?
This is specific to the women's facility because there is only one women's facility, and I believe the report was specifically looking at replacement of that particular building.
Okay, Eric, are you aware of any other step-down facilities for men that we are currently in possession of?
I am not aware of any existing facility. I believe that when the HOK report comes, amongst the scenarios that will be presented are step-down facilities for both genders, and really holistic systemic recommendations for how to look out 10, 20, 30 years for all of the facilities. So it's almost, if you could imagine, the addressing the issues for the women related facilities are front loaded into what would probably be a longer process for dealing with the longer term issues. Does that make sense?
Yes, the presenter of that, what will be the Hoke report, was giving us version 1 of the presentation, as I recall it.
Right. He was doing the kind of baseline of what we have, what our population is looking like. And so when they come back, which we're working on scheduling in the next couple of weeks, they will have a series of recommendations, and it could be standalone, one big campus, 2 smaller campuses, and looking at how that will relate to the system regionally, how it interacts with the courts, how it interacts with the sheriffs, and just big picture. And then basically giving you a menu to say, I'll have that, but with fries.
Okay. Are you the liaison for the state for that discussion?
I am the what would I call myself? I am the Philip Habib of the discussion. I'm trying to make sure that all the right people are in the room when the discussion happens. Ultimately, Commissioner Baker and Corrections are the client, and BGS is the architectural firm helping them out. But HOK will come back and present, and then I think it's a conversation that's going to involve your committee, Senator Sears' committee, and probably Joint Justice to just bring it all together.
Okay. Could you just stick in the back of your mind that when you get the report, if you could float that off to me and let me know so I can try to start scheduling things, that would be most appreciated.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We want to make sure that we start everybody off sort of on the same footing. And then I'm imagining that individual committees are going to be looking for different sort of sub-testimony once the big picture is out there.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
I think about you every day, sir.
Gee, thanks. Try to get some sleep anyway, okay?
Okay. So the other bit of language in this section 3 relates to the appropriation in A1, which is 11.6 million for design and construction of a secure residential recovery facility.
That's the Woodside replacement?
Yes.
Okay.
So this is saying with respect to that appropriation.
I'm sorry to jump in. I beg your pardon, Becky, but that's actually the
Middlesex replacement, but it's
going to the
Woodside. Yes, thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah.
We're on the same page.
Who's on first? What's on second?
Yeah. So this is being used to construct a 16-bed secure residential recovery facility. And then there's a parcel ID number that's referenced on the town of Essex tax parcel maps, and that is the location of the former Woodside Center. And it's will be used for transitional support for individuals who are being discharged from inpatient psychiatric care. And then the remaining language is more specific as to the design of the building. So it says through interior fit up versus building redesign, the 16-bed facility shall include 2 8-bed wings designed with the capability to allow for separation of one wing from the main section of the facility if necessary. Both wings shall be served by common clinical and activity spaces. Neither wing shall include a locked seclusion area, and the facility shall not use emergency and voluntary procedures. And there's some language later on in the bill more specific to this. And then finally, outdoor space shall be adequate for exercise and other activities, but not less than 10,000 square feet. This specific section came to House institutions from the healthcare committee with respect to this facility.
So we're going from a facility that currently has razor wire or a facility that has no such thing?
I'm not sure I can answer that question. I don't know if Eric.
I know the facility will be fenced. I can't speak specifically to the materials that will be used in that fence, but it will still be secure. It just won't be temporary.
Okay.
And that's probably something for Commissioner Squirrel to go over with you.
And my understanding is that the term locked seclusion area has a specific meaning. So I don't know that that speaks to necessarily the fencing around the facility, but it has another meaning.
They're talking about interior rooms.
Right.
Okay.
So we discussed subsection D, so I'm going to move on to section 4 unless there are any other questions on this. Okay. Commerce and community development, section 4. So in FY22, there are funds to the historic sites for major maintenance, underwater preserves, roadside historic markers, and unmarked burial fund. And then in FY23 in subsection B, everything except for the unmarked burial fund also receives an appropriation. There is some language with respect to the underwater preserves in subsection C and D. First,
Becky, could you just scroll back up about
Sure.
half a page? Okay, wait, whoop, too far. So we are sending to the agency 35,000 under 2 for the project. And then under subsection B, we're sending them another 25,000. What am I not understanding?
So I'll scroll down to the language because that might explain this. So in subsection D, the amount appropriated in A2, which is at 35,000, it says that not more than 10,000 shall be used to open not more than 3 new sites in FY22. So the idea is that there's an additional 10,000 in FY22 for opening not more than 3 new sites. I think the typical annual appropriation is 25,000. So they upped that to 35 for just this 1 year.
Did they anticipate something specific?
I believe this was based on the testimony from the agency.
Okay. I'm seeing it now on the screen, so I'll ask it. The agency shall not authorize reefing of the ship Adirondack. Committee, I don't know if anybody had some thought about that, but I just wanted to make the observation. We had people that were coming in to talk about that. And apparently the House has made a decision to not go in that direction. It's just one of those things that may or may not be an issue between us, but I guess we'll see.
Was that, there was no money earmarked for that? Why is there an authorization not to? What business do we have in that? It's not an environmental issue.
Well, apparently somebody on institutions on the other body decided it was.
Oh, okay, because if they're not asking for money, I gotta call from Art Cohen. We talked about it. I guess he was going to come into the committee to talk about it, but
Yep.
I just find it one way or the other, they not authorize. Well, we're not giving any money. So how can we say we don't authorize it? I'm missing something.
I don't know, but it's a question that we probably ought to have some more conversation. And did Art say that he was coming into this committee?
Yeah, I think he was going to get a hold of Art or someone else from from his department was going to contact Denise. I don't know
Yeah.
if they have.
It was Jonathan Eddy, and
Yeah.
we canceled him on Friday, last
That's right.
Friday.
That's what it was. Right.
Right.
Yeah,
But he's coming back, right?
yes, he is.
Okay.
Okay.
Good.
Okay.
So I can move on to section 5 on page 7. This reflects all of the FY22 and FY23 appropriations to the Building Communities Grants programs. So there's no additional language in these programs, but over the course of FY22 and FY23, I'm just gonna scroll down. There is a 4.2 million appropriated over the course of both years to these programs. This is reflected in the spreadsheet, but I did want to point out just so you all are aware, because not everyone was on the committee when this decision was made, but a few years ago for the BGS grants for human services and educational facilities, you'll see this reflected in subdivision 5 and 6. There was a decision by the committee to separate out the appropriation for specifically for human services and for education to make sure that it was divided equally between the two. So that is why that one particular grant is separated out over 2 line items. Section 6, education. So every year in the capital bill, there's approximately 50,000 appropriated in both years to AOE for funding emergency projects. And so this is happening in FY22 and FY23.
Eric, do you have any idea of what kind of emergency projects pop up? That's not a lot of money. And I'm curious as to why it's actually appearing here.
My understanding, and Becky may know a bit as well, is that these situations are rare, but they do like to keep a little bit of money in the fund in case a roof fails or something like that. It's generally small bailout projects. Is that, you're nodding, right, Becky?
Yeah, so that's mine. I've always sort of heard the example of a roof falling in or a furnace blowing up kind of situation, a real sort of urgent emergency. And this is, I think, in the context that there used to be money appropriated in the capital bill for the state aid for school construction program. So what the legislature still does now, although that program is suspended, is allow for these emergency projects to go through AOE.
Okay.
Okay, so on page 10, there's UVM, there's 1.5 million in each year for construction, renovation, and major maintenance at a facility owned or operated in the state by UVM. And there is similar language in section 8 for the Vermont State Colleges. So in each year, there is the amount, 2 million for construction, renovation, and major maintenance. And then just want to point out in B2, there is 100,000 in FY23 for infrastructure transformation planning.
There goes that planning money again.
Love planning.
Section 9 is natural resources. So over FY22 and 23, there's approximately 21.2 million to various A&R projects, such as the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. There's appropriations for dam maintenance. The House Institutions Committee added in this subdivision 4 here, 500,000 for contaminants of emerging concern special fund. And last year in the capital bill, this fund was established. And so this is putting an additional amount into that special fund. And then there are sort of general appropriations for state parks and fish and wildlife in this section as well.
So pausing again. Any idea why they took out the walleye guys? Eric, you're muted. I know you're saying something funny.
Yeah, well, it's me
I
talking, so
might have been about to say the same thing Eric was going to say.
they don't put in the walleye guys. The traditional spawning path of the walleye funding originates in your committee. And there was a moment where Senator Mazza, I nearly persuaded them to include the walleye funding in the interest of amusing you. But cooler heads prevailed, and it was felt that it should be left to your committee to show the commitment to the walleye guys.
We'll get them with hook, line, and sinker.
I say brilliant use of the word spawning, but hook, line, and sinker is pretty good too.
We're on a roll now. Makes up for the architects, maybe.
Becky, you're doing a wonderful job coming back from being interrupted, so please continue.
Sure. I think you all heard testimony on this, but one of the appropriations that was added, I believe not in the governor's proposal, was the 85,000 to the Green Mountain Club. So I just wanted to point that out in subsection D for conservation of 12.9 acres of land in the town of Johnson along the Long Trail Treadway and future location of an off-road trailhead parking area.
Hopefully it's not 3 acres of, what's that term? McCormick, help me out here.
Impervious.
Thank you.
So section 10, clean water initiatives, there is amounts appropriated in FY22 to agriculture, DEC, VHCB, all for, sorry, and A&R, all for different clean water initiatives. And then, as you might recall, the way it works with this clean water section is that there's a amount amount set aside in FY23. So in subsection E, that's that 11 million that is for clean water projects. Those are not named yet in this bill. What happens is that the Clean Water Board reviews and recommends how to spend that $11 million by December 1st of this year, and makes that recommendation to be included in the FY23 budget adjustment process. So you'll get those recommendations for next year's bill.
Becky, do you know if that's done by rule?
It is done by this language here. They have I believe they have a way of prioritizing projects in the Clean Water Board section of law, but the language to direct them to do that is in the capital bill.
Okay.
And I wanted to lastly point out subsection F is referring to the FY22 appropriation to DEC for the municipal pollution control projects. Those are grants that DEC awards. There is reference here that they shall prioritize the addition and in the initial approximately 1.7 million for legacy projects. And this is to make sure that the older projects, I believe it was for Brattleboro, are completed by next year. And then just on page 15, just moving back to the any appropriation in this section, FY22 or 23, if an agency receives funding from this section, they have to make sure with the state treasurer that those projects are capital eligible. And this is something that the committees have put in the capital bill over the last few years when the clean water section was started, just to make sure that everything that's getting money is eligible to get capital funds. Section 11 is the 22 and 23 appropriation to the military. So this is 1.8 million over the 2 years, and there's no additional language here from the appropriations. Section 12 is public safety. So in FY22, again, you'll note that the amount is going to BGS for public safety. And that's for construction of the Williston Public Safety Field Station, and then separately renovation of the Middlesex Station. And then in FY23, directly to public safety is 50,000 for a feasibility study for the Vermont Police Academy in Pittsford.
Looks like you're gonna get your state police barracks, Dick.
Pittsburgh.
No, I'm talking about Williston.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Any questions? Oh, okay. Section 13, FY22 and 23, there are appropriations to the Agency of Agriculture for the Big E building for major maintenance. Section 14, there's 200,000 over the 2-year period for dry hydrants. Section 15 there's 1.5 million over 2 years to BGS for upgrades at the Department of Labor building for mechanical systems and HVAC, life safety needs, and minor interior renovations at 5 Green Mountain Drive in Montpelier. Section 16 is VHCB, so they receive 1.8 million over each year for housing and conservation projects. And then section 17 is 250 over the 2 years to the Agency of Digital Services for digital orthophotography mapping. So we're finishing up the money section of the bill. Section 18 is all of the amounts of unexpended funds from previous capital bills that are being sort of put back into the bottom line to pay for projects in this year's bill. So this is either money that different agencies have let the committee know that they were not able to expend it for the project for which they received an appropriation. I just wanted to point out one for the VTEL program. Where is this one? Subsection E. A few years ago, there was a reallocation of, VTA. There's the money appropriated to the VTA a number of years ago about $900,000 that was never spent. And a few years ago, you had appropriated it to the Department of Public Service for broadband expansion, and it was never used. So it is now being put back to the bottom line of the bill.
So that's the Vermont Telecommunications Authority. Are they reconstituting that entity?
I believe that entity was dissolved, but I need to double check on that.
There's a bill out there that I think Randy Brock's doing to put them back into place. I don't know what traction that has.
Okay.
Page 21, section 19. In the bill each year, there's a section that tells you how much the state treasurer is authorized to issue in general obligation bonds. And this is based on the recommendation from CDAC. So for this year, it's 123,180,000. And so the total in section 1, where that was approximately 127 million, that is a combination of this amount that is authorized to be issued for bonding, as well as the total amount of reallocations. So that's where you get that total amount that can be spent for over the 2-year period.
Gotcha.
Okay, so we are moving into the policy section of the bill now. This is set up by subject area. So first is BGS related language. Section 20 is creating a study committee for reviewing and recommending potential uses for the property located at 546 State Farm Road, which was the former Southeast State Correctional Facility. The membership of the committee is someone appointed by the Town of Windsor Select Board, the ED of the Mount Ascutney Regional Commission, the Commissioner of BGS, Secretary of Agriculture, the Executive Director of VHCB, Secretary of Commerce and Community Development, and the Secretary of Natural Resources.
Mr. Chairman, may I?
Yes, sir.
McCormick? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so, and what is this committee supposed to be studying?
So in subsection C, the powers are to review options for the use of that land. So
Again.
it's-
It's been studied and studied and studied. Oh, God.
And that's a good segue to that part of what they have to do is review past studies. And so those are named here in subdivisions 1 through 3, different reports that have been provided on the Southeast State Correctional Facility, transitional housing, and there was a report a couple years ago in 2018 on the major facilities under Human Services.
So we're going to study it again and study the studies.
Study the studies.
Previously had conclusions, I'm sure.
Well, if you're studying it again, you should study all the studies before you.
Wisdom of Wasserman. This is in response to our request to sell the property. So.
Yeah. It's very good, Beck. I'm glad to see you joining in the humor of the conversation. We should have some fun with Alice on this subject tomorrow. That
Yeah, torture her.
Subsection D, the assistance. So BGS is going to provide administrative, technical, and legal assistance for this. I believe Eric volunteered his summer vacation for this.
I was going to say, look on the bright side, Eric. You'll be able to cut and paste from the various reports that have been issued prior.
Some of which were written by me.
Yeah, no doubt.
There's a report due December 15th to this committee and Corrections on Institutions with its findings and any recommendations. And then there's some specifics to the meetings of the committee. So BGS will call the first meeting by July 15th. The executive director of the Regional Planning Commission will be the chair. A majority of the membership shall constitute a quorum. And then the committee ceases to exist on July 1st of 2022. There is also appropriated from, I believe this is the major maintenance line item in FY22. A non-state employer member gets a per diem and compensation reimbursement for not more than 6 meetings.
Okay.
Section 21, the New Haven Depot building, this section deals with the possible relocation or demolition of this building. So there's some finding about the ownership of the building and land in subsection A1 and 2. So the building is owned by the Agency of Commerce and Community Development. And then the land in subdivision 2 is owned by the Agency of Transportation. So that's why you'll see.
Railroad station, right?
That's
Yeah.
right, yeah. So that's why both of those agencies are involved in this decision-making.
So Dick, while you're talking about that, this is gonna no doubt come into your committee as well, but I really believe we need to salvage that building. I would hate to tear it down. Move it,
Yep.
sure, but let's not tear it down. I don't know if you've ever been by that, but that's a classic that really is part of Vermont
Yeah.
history.
We don't want to throw that away. No.
How big a deal is it to move a brick building?
Well, it's it's a big deal, very costly. And the only reason they got to move it is because of Amtrak coming through. Yeah, it can be done, but like I said, number one, you got to have a place to put it. And number two, it's pretty costly. Brick is pretty tough to move.
Yeah,
We got to do what we can to salvage it.
yeah, no, I agree with you. I agree. Well, we're dealing with railroad here as nostalgia, but railroad is also transportation.
Well, it
You
is.
know, that's-
Amtrak is a big player in
yeah,
passenger sales in Montreal. We're going to have Burlington another year, Burlington, New York City, and that's pretty exciting. Been waiting a long time for it. The Middlebury Tunnel was the last big thing, so we got that completed.
yeah, no, I appreciate that, Dick.
Yeah, that's nice.
That's,
Nice project.
Okay,
So in subsection B, transportation and the Division of Historic Preservation are authorized to determine how to best preserve the building by relocating it to another parcel. BGS is also given authority in B2 to execute a quick claim deed to transfer any interest in the building, but that would have to be subject to a preservation easement to be held by the Division of Historic Preservation. And then in subsection C, it says, if the State Historic Preservation Officer and the Secretary of Transportation find that it's not physically or financially practicable to relocate the building, they'll work in coordination with BGS and the Secretary of Transportation to decommission the building and delist it from the National Register of Historic Places.
just gonna red flag this section, Dick, for your
Yep.
benefit. It seems to me that we ought to have, if they make the decision, it's not physically or financially practical, before we give them authority to pull the trigger on delisting it, we ought to have them come back.
We'll work with the Agency of Transportation on this. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Section 22 is just sort of a technical correction. I'm on the top of page 25. Just cleaning up some language of an appropriation in 2018 for 133 State Street. It specified the Agency of Digital Services, which is not located there. Section 23, this section is extending the sunset date for the Capitol Complex Security Advisory Committee. So that was set to repeal. That commission was set to not exist as of June 30th of this year, but it's being extended to June 30th, 2023.
So let me pause you again, Beck. We just, as a Senate, passed a gun bill that includes a section for a report that has to be issued by this committee. Not institutions, but the Capitol Complex Security Advisory Committee. That report is due in December. And as I understand it, the current makeup of the committee's authorization language says that it has 2 off-session meetings that it's limited to. We had a committee earlier that's given, I believe, 6 opportunities to study a bunch of studies. And I'm not sure whether or not the House Corrections and Institutions Committee realized that the gun bill included a provision requiring a report from this particular advisory committee. Was there any conversation over there about that?
I'm not sure if that committee was made aware of that. I had heard that in the context of this committee potentially not being in existence anymore.
Right.
But I don't know that. So I was asked whether it was going to be extended such that the committee could actually do that work and relate that plan that was in this version of the bill. But I don't know that it was presented to House institutions.
So assuming this committee is kept going through this repeal of the sunset, currently, as I understand it, I'm chair of that advisory committee. And it would change to the House institutions chair. But when does that change take place?
I believe it's in January. In January of each year, it changes over.
So I'm going to be in charge of drafting the committee bill for a bill I voted against. Oh, this is too funny.
You
Okay.
can't make this stuff up.
No, you can't.
You can handle it, Mr. Chair. You're good at that.
Yes, I've already written the end of it. There's-
Looking
the
forward to your
conclusion will be
summation.
there's no reason for further action at this time.
Then you don't need 6 meetings.
Oh,
We're behind you, way behind you. We're behind
yeah,
you.
thanks a lot. What a bunch of
You need the 6 meetings to figure out, what the argument is for your conclusion.
Yeah. And it'll still say the same thing. No further
Yeah,
action.
oh, yeah, no.
necessary at this time.
You've got your conclusion. Now you got to do a study to get there.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, Beck, couldn't resist asking.
I'd make more jokes, but I feel like it's not appropriate for me to do.
Oh, you'll get plenty of opportunity, don't worry.
We make the jokes around here. You just
Section 24. So this is what I was referring to earlier in my testimony about the engineering costs being transferred at some unknown date to the general fund. So as you can see from the long list of acts that this has been sort of extended, this first came in the Capitol bill in 2013. And this language here is extending it further to July 1st, 2023.
And Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
in answer to Senator Mazza's previous question, there are 16 people in that shop, as we call it, starting with Joe Asia and Jeremy and the others on that team.
Okay. Depending on how high his blood pressure gets, we might have Senator Mazza reporting this provision on the floor.
Seeing as how some of my favorite people in BGS would have to go home if this changed, I will keep an eye on it.
Okay.
So the next two sections have to deal with federal funds that are coming to the state from the American Rescue Plan. So there are section 20, they're dealing with two pots of money. Section 25 is dealing with the federal funds that are coming through the state and local fiscal recovery fund. And there's specific language in that amount that allows for money to be used for water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. The second pot of funds in section 22 is coming from the coronavirus capital projects fund. And I believe there's 113 million of more unrestricted funds for capital projects coming to the state. So the American Rescue Plan has appropriated this money, but there's not yet any guidance on use of the money. So this language is trying to address a process for how it could be used without knowing exactly what the guidance is going to say. So subsection A has some intent language that says, to the extent permitted by federal law and guidance, the amounts appropriated in this act, so in the whole capital bill, should be offset by using federal funds provided by to the state by the American Rescue Plan from that pot of money, the state and local coronavirus fiscal recovery funds, whenever possible, for capital projects that support water and sewer infrastructure. And I mentioned that the federal bill also allows for broadband infrastructure, but there just happens that there are not any broadband projects in this bill. There are only water and sewer related ones. So any appropriation that is offset for future capital construction projects in fiscal year 22 shall be used for the capital budget adjustment process next year. So if you find that you were able to sort of swap out $10 million, let's say, then that $10 million can be used next year in the capital budget adjustment process. So subsection B sets up the process for this. The Commissioner of Finance and Management, if he or she determines that in FY22, the FY22 appropriations for water and sewer may be offset by federal funds, then the Commissioner is authorized to substitute those federal funds for capital funds. The Commissioner, if that happens, the Commissioner has to notify the chairs of this committee and House Committee on Corrections and Institutions of any substitutions. And then those offset funds shall be used for future capital construction projects in next year's capital bill.
Becky, let's just assume that federal money comes down the pike very soon and the strings are identified. Would it be possible for appropriations to put an amendment on this bill to tweak this without waiting for the budget adjustment next year?
Tweak it before the end of this session, or you mean at the beginning of
Yes.
next
Yes,
session?
before the end of this session.
Well, so the language, this sort of contingency language, I'll call it, I think something similar is going to be in the budget bill for these funds, because I don't know that we're going to get the guidance on the use of funds before the end of this session. So I suppose if there was something that came up, really soon that clarified the use of these funds, it would be possible after when this bill goes out of your committee and goes to appropriations, that they could put an amendment on more specific use of the funds. But I think the idea here is giving the Commissioner of Finance and Management the ability to swap out, to make those substitutions, knowing that it will probably come after the session ends. And there
I'm
is
just-
a, oh,
I'm
sorry.
just trying to play out in my head whether we should adopt a commitment to having these funds dealt with next year as opposed to trying to jam something through this year. And I'm scoping out in my head, is there a possibility we could get into an argument with appropriations as to how we move forward on this? But it may be much ado about nothing if nothing comes down, but if it does come down soon, I can see a temptation by appropriations to try to do something immediately.
So I will say that there, in subsection D, the amount that can be offset under this section is, and I remember a former chair of this committee used to say, never say the word only and million in one section, one sentence, but that the amount reserved is not more than $30 million that can be substituted. And
Okay.
it is limited to not more than 15 million in FY22. So the most that could happen sort of off session this year of offsetting federal funds with capital funds related to water and sewer infrastructure under this pot of money is 15 million. And so if that amount is not used, the language says of that 30 million, any remaining amounts would go to projects for next year. And that would go through the sort of normal budget adjustment process where I think there'd be more coordination with the appropriations committees on this.
Yep. Okay.
And then I skipped over this, but subsection C has a report due by the Commissioner of Finance and Management by December 15th to review and recommend projects that should be funded for next year's capital bill that would be given to the chairs of the chair of this committee and to the House Institutions Committee and be given to the governor for inclusion in the proposed capital budget. So I think there are some limits around what could be used here, and that it's 15 million at most, sort of off session this year, and then the remaining amounts would go to the chairs of the institutions committees and would possibly be included in the governor's recommended budget for next year. So it would go through more of the full process with the legislature.
Okay.
And then section 26 is, there's also a similar intent here with respect to that separate pot of money of 113 million for generally just capital projects. It's not specific to water and sewer. So the idea here is that that pot of money should be used, divided between the branches, so be used for capital projects necessary for the executive, legislative, and judicial branches in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. And then subsection B sets up sort of designated buckets of how that money should be used, although it is not appropriating anything in this year. So there's 62 million sort of allocated to AHS for mental health and correctional infrastructure, and then 51 million to the legislative and judicial branches. And then what will happen is, again, a recommendation by the end of this year by Finance and Management on how to use those funds within those sort of allocated amounts and designated uses of the money. So Finance and Management would be, sorry, I misspoke. Finance and Management would be doing that for the executive branch amounts. The Joint Legislative Management Committee and the court administrator would have come back with recommendations for the amount allocated to the legislative and judicial branches. Should I move on or any questions
Yep.
on that?
Nope, we're good.
Page 29, some additional human services language. This goes to the the secure residential recovery facility appropriation in section 3. So there's some intent language here in section 27 that any proposal offered by DMH to expand a state-owned or operated facility or capacity at a state-owned or operated facility in the state's mental health system should always include or identify resources to support Vermont's community mental health system. And then section 28 of the bill, directs the Department of Mental Health to issue a request for information by August 1st from designated and specialized service agencies and peer-run agencies for developing and implementing programming for unlocked community residences for transitional support for those individuals being discharged from inpatient psychiatric care or for intervention to prevent inpatient care. Responses to the ROI would be provided to DMH not later than December 1st of this year, and would also need to include provisions that address the need to develop and implement community residential programming for youth. Separately in subsection B, DMH is tasked with convening a steering group of interested stakeholders to consider and provide input to the department's prioritization process for determining the highest area of need of mental health across the mental health system of care with regard to the bed proposals. And then subsection C is a report due December 15th to the institutions and healthcare committees. And that would include a review of all the responses that came in response to the ROI, a bed needs assessment of all levels of care in the mental health system, a summary of input from that stakeholder group, and an analysis of opportunities under the latest federal stimulus bill, the American Rescue Plan, for any capital or operational bridge funding for additional unlocked community residential capacity or additional similar community capacities. Okay, section 31. This is repealing some language that was first in the Capitol bill in 2019 and was amended last year that required Dale to adopt rules on involuntary emergency procedures. And so this is repealing the requirement that Dale adopt that rule. And as you might recall from the language in section 3, the secure residential recovery facility specifically says now that it should not use involuntary emergency procedures at that facility.
So Becky, let me freeze you for a moment and talk specifically to our newest legislator as well as to the two who were on the committee last time around. This is the classic example of what you might end up having to face when you're reporting on this bill on the floor. If somebody says to you, what does section 29 actually repeal? Hopefully Becky will have provided by then a summary of each of these things we're talking about here today so that you can quickly refer to her summary and be able to respond to that question on the floor, because otherwise you're probably not going to have it in the back of your head. What was Action Resolves number 42, section 31, etc. Becky, I'm not sure whether you've actually already done this for the House purposes, but Becky does a pretty good job at detailing each of the specific things that you might get questioned on. That's another reason why it's really important to try to pay attention to the sections that you'll be reporting on, how she's summarized it, and then we're able to answer it without having to go to third reading to get a response. That's all.
I have provided a section summary of the House passed version, and I think that is now on your website, on your webpage. And I'll do the same once it comes out of your committee.
Thank you.
So the last section is amending statute with respect to engineering planning advances. So this is limiting, so a municipality under this section can get an advance of funds for engineering planning for public water supply systems. And this is limiting, this is extending that to engineering and land use planning. And it is also limiting the amount of those funds to 25% that can be used to evaluate land use implications of facilities, including impacts on the state planning goals, availability of housing and economic development. And then some additional language in subsection D that's being added to the statute is allowing for a municipality to contract with a regional planning commission for technical assistance to administer and manage these planning advances and coordinate engineering services and evaluate land use implications. Costs that are associated with these services for the RPC are eligible for reimbursement under the engineering planning advance.
This sounds pretty simple, but I guess I'm going to ask anybody who may know. It seems to me this has the potential for expanding considerably what's going on with what normally would be engineering services. And I'm trying to figure out how land use implications may potentially broaden that beyond where things currently are. Anybody know? Somehow I didn't think so. Okay, I'll flag it and ask Alice tomorrow.
Okay, and then last but not least, section 31 is the effective date. So the bill takes effect upon passage. And just so you all know, with the capital bill, because it takes effect on passage, the money appropriated in the bill is available on passage and not July 1st at the start of the fiscal year.
Anybody have any questions about the language? I don't hear anybody screaming, so Beck, if you could take the screen share down. So far, the only potential hiccups that we might be divided from the House on are walleye guys and whether to sink a ship. Do I have that right?
Yeah, I say let's sink her.
I think we could have some fun with that, actually.
Yeah.
Beck, I want to thank you for a very nice presentation. I'm assuming, hopefully safely, that you'll be here tomorrow as we go through this again. And Eric, I don't know if I've asked you this question before. I might have, but I will ask it again. When I go to present this to appropriations, are you going to be sitting next to me to explain each and every one of these provisions?
The whole staff is there.
Like a bad penny.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll keep asking you just to make sure it's very important that you are
You
there.
don't go there unless you got the backup. I don't go there unless I got AOT with me. That's it.
Right. No, we'll have your back, sir.
Okay.
Okay.
Anybody have any other questions or comments this afternoon? I see nobody chomping at the bit. With that, I've got 10 minutes to 3.